Hi, I'm Chris. This is the Art of the Call video podcast where we're asking artists, curators, and directors to talk about the call for entries process. In this video, it's Sandra Banister, a photographer from Portland.
I am a professional photographer and I do primarily landscape and portraiture with focus on cross-cultural and intercultural advocacy. So my subjects tend to be from other countries and most recently dancers, Apsara, Cambodian dancers, African dancers. So I tend to focus on that. And then I do just a lot of experimental work and humanitarian editorial sort of work. So whatever floats my boat at the time, really. Part of it was just trial and error. I look who is jurying it because you want to make sure you have whoever the jurors are of a higher pedigree. Sometimes if it's oversaturated, then you tend to think I have a snowball chance in hell. And if I'm going to go for something that is going to be oversaturated, then it has to be of the high level. So it would be anywhere for the Santa Fe photo workshops or Black and White magazine, which I actually won in that one recently, and so that'll be published in December. So those sort of things, what's ever going to give you notoriety and build up your portfolio so you have credibility, and then the collectors start coming more, and also just the pedigree. So for instance, New Space Center for Photography, they bring in not only the local members but a lot of international talent, and so if you can get juried in there, and so I sold recently at that. So those are the venues I look for. Is I can try it once locally here for the galleries and see how that goes. I tend to sell in high traffic venues, and so I've been pushing more towards the high traffic venues. And for like photo magazines, it's just a matter of trial and error and seeing which way it goes. So so that's pretty much how I look for it. What I do also look for is when I look at whoever's won those particular contests or juried in sort of situations, you want to make sure that it has the pedigree. I mean, that you really did jury and you didn't get lazy, because I know you get thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions, but sometimes I've seen contests where I was like, okay, I didn't win, but I don't understand why that particular piece didn't evoke any sort of emotion in me and anybody I asked. So I tend to wonder, sometimes people think that the contests can be, granted it's subjective, but some of the art was like really bad photoshopping, and it's like, why did you even allow that in that level of a contest? So you have to be really, really careful to make sure that whoever wins is really good at what they did. So if you have the bar of like James Nay Shui and Michael Kenna and people like that, those are the type of people that you would expect to be in that caliber of talent. You would expect to be in those contests. It depends if it's a themed show. So for example, for Women's Caucus for Art, Bound, I had several ones that had just been sitting there for a couple of years that were just aching to go into that. And so I thought I'd give that a shot. And then who's judging, the pedigree of the judges, if it's a theme. And if it's too broad of a scope, sometimes I think that can be a problem, because then it's open way too much to interpretation and the artist isn't pushing themselves. And sometimes I will just look at any sort of jury competitions as a way to push myself. And so you kind of gird your loins for rejection, but I think you also need to take a look at a theme and say, hey, can I just really break into that as an artist and come up with a piece that would describe that, even no matter how abstract it is. So that's how I choose. But I've been pickier lately on where I've been sending my stuff to make sure that that they're just not, that they're actually looking at some of the emerging folks as well, because sometimes you'll see I think some of the jurors get more comfortable with who's tried and true, because then you don't run a risk of stuff not selling. But sometimes if people have actually sold and they can be viewed as art, then I think that those people need to be given a shot. Actually, when I've sold something, when I've either sold something or I've won some sort of notoriety or an award for it, and there's stuff that I've sold and gotten notoriety for that I never would have thought of. And then I've got this consistent theme of stuff that people always sell. I have a few images that, doesn't matter where I go, they always sell, and that's when I consider it successful. But I just don't want to be one of those one-hit wonders. You want to make sure that you're getting, more new stuff out there. So for me, it's even if I've gotten really positive feedback but have not sold, because I've done that at one venue and then taken that same piece to another venue and sold it. So if I can get, and I sit there and I watch people. If I'm at an opening, I watch people, and if I linger around it, they ask me I'm the artist, and they will start asking me questions about the piece. And then to me, that's really important. Then I'm thinking, well, then just buy it if you like it so much. And then the affirmation comes when somebody actually decides to shell out the dough for that piece. So sometimes I pull back and I watch how people react to different pieces, and I watch to see how they react to my piece. And then if they're really lingering over my piece and talking about it, I go up to them and I ask them if they have any questions. And so that's part of how I get my feedback, just from the general public. And what goes on the mind of jurors, sometimes I don't know. I've been really lucky lately with, I don't know if it's luck or talent or what it is, but this year's been a banner year for me of getting some recognition on my pieces for some pretty prestigious curators. So, well, the only feedback I got from, besides being accepted, is one thing. Sometimes they just don't give you any feedback. The other one I got is I'm very inconsistent. So if you look at my website, yeah, I have categories of certain portfolio things, but if you go on a lot of website, people have these really set portfolios of work. So I did this project when I went to Cambodia with Khmer Rouge survivors. They're locally here, and did a whole series. And I did everything from the Killing Fields memorials to Tuol Sleng to the rice fields to Angkor Wat to the villages to the people to the children to the poverty and everything else. And to me, my view was to give a holistic view of Cambodia, as opposed to the sex trafficking and the garbage and all of the other stuff that can go on there, because Cambodians almost find that borderline insulting because they want to show that there's cool places to come to Cambodia. And so so if you look on my website at Cambodia Awakening, some of the images is like duotones, and some of it's just my art, and some of it is black and white, and some of it is color. But for the whole book that I did on it, there was a progression of duotone to this kind of infrared dreamlike state into this awakening stage, which turned more into color. And that was the point I was trying to make, but the curator at this particular gallery just thought my work was too inconsistent. And it didn't, but I was like trying to explain the whole thread and the holistic view of how you would approach it. But it is what it is folks have different views of it. But some people found, because I print on metallic paper, so the Angkor Wat images and some of those other infrared images come out really cool on the infrared. And so I did get a lot of notoriety, and I sell. So regardless, I think it just depends on what the jurors, I think, are looking for. Very consistent sort of look and feel to the photographs, and I didn't quite have that in my project because I don't think that's where my project was going. Well, they ask you when you present it. I was presenting the whole idea behind it, and when I presented the idea behind it, and I sent the images in the order, was to say it starts off here, right, in this sort of like kind of dreamish nightmare state into this awakening state, where you go from black and white duotone in your head to when you're waking up and you see the sunrise at Angkor Wat, which is in color. And so I explained that, and they'd asked for that explanation as to my thought process behind the whole thing, but I just don't think it was the consistency behind it that they care for. I think what has happened is social media and digital has changed it. I don't think it's going downhill. I just think that there could be a view of it being oversaturated, especially in photography. Everybody's a photographer now, so you go from being a photographer to being an artist to creating your own kind of fine art idea behind it. I think that's part of the velocity of digital and the social networking has had a huge impact on art. I think it's the same theory that went behind with social networking when they thought, oh, all this online shopping is going to put the retailers out of business. It's not. People want that tactile experience of coming in places like this, getting a cup of coffee, looking at the art, actually seeing the art, seeing it framed, seeing what the output is on it. And some people prefer just to go online and order something. I've had both. I've had orders off my website, and then I've had stuff just completely framed. So I think it's just changing on every artist needs to cater to whatever the market is dictating, and with all that noise on Twitter and Facebook and websites and SEO and everything else, is trying to maintain a presence in that environment, because frankly you could have a mediocre artist who has dominated that and could very well sell a lot more than somebody who's extremely talented but doesn't know how or is afraid to put themselves out there. I think that's part of what the change is, but I think it's just exponential to or relative to what the audience is. And I think the taste of the audience is changing as well. So anything goes to a certain extent, and it's how do you define art? I think it's more what people are confused with these days than anything else. The social networking piece, Web 2.0, all of that, Web 3.0, however you want to describe it, is definitely a current trend. And for the folks that are trying to submit, I mean, I know that people who have just not adapted to that, and it's more difficult for those talented artists to get their art in, because if they have to go get giclées done, or they have to get images done, and they have to get it put out there, and if they don't know how to do it, or they have a phobia to it, that's a definite trend that I think is made it difficult for some of the folks that haven't been able to figure that out. And maybe the younger generations is less so. I think it's more of a product of the older generations. I see less of the older generations adapting to it well. And I would say that the boomers do okay with it. The X-Geners and millennials, they've got it all figured out. So us boomers sit there and say we have to keep up with all of them and make sure that you're not, the technology is something that you don't shy away from. And I think that's where a lot of it's trending. If you don't have a place on the internet, and that's true for just about everybody, isn't it? Yeah. It varies to the call. I mean, there's not a lot of consistency out there as to how you need to. Some of them say 72 DPI, some of them say 300, but so big. Some of them say it can't be any more than 1,000, pixels, and that's very confusing for some people who don't understand how to even Photoshop or figure out how to sort out their images. For me, it's a no-brainer. It's just sometimes you may have submitted an image and forgot to resize it the right way. So I think what would really help artists is a consistency, a standard, a total standard on the size of the image, and if you actually send it in the wrong size, then it pings you back saying you sent it back in the wrong size, because like as it's evolving, you can see where it's just a free-for-all. It's whoever the web designer was at Popular Photography or Black and White Magazine or Newspace or Oregon Women's Caucus for Art or WCA or any of those places. So, which I've run into EntryThingy a few times, and I thought, okay, that's kind of a fun, quirky thing to call it. But I think having some pretty specific standards, I think, is going to help the artists and the community in a huge way for us, because preparing your images can be, first of all, and then they want you to have your name and a dash and one, and then they want you to, everybody has a different way of naming your images as well, and what you're going to call them. And then you have to keep track of all these places that you sent it to, and then you lose track. And unless you got a special spreadsheet, but still, that's a lot of images that you're building up in your system. So you really have to be technologically savvy enough to be able to do that. And if somebody can come up with a consistent way, so some poor person can go, like, if I was a 72-year-old artist was a total technophobe, I can go down to somebody, or even to somebody like me or another service, and pay to have my images, my paintings, scanned in, put it at a set pixel, or aspect ratio or whatever, and be able to submit that so that I have a fighting chance to be able to submit online. But yeah, I think part of it's just an evolution thing too. So don't they get oversaturated with them? I mean, I always think that when there's a call to art that they probably get more than they need. But I think that's part of the conundrum, because everybody's jumped on the bandwagon. Everybody's jumped on the bandwagon. If you send 5 images in for $35, and then all of a sudden the people running these nonprofits are making a hunk of change. Well, first of all, you should have the pedigree for people to be interested in going to the calls of art. You know, sometimes I worry that the whole thing is going to wind up getting scammed to just get money out of people and not really taking a hardcore look at the images and getting good imagery in there, which is why you have to make sure that when you're judging these contests, that you're not getting lazy and you're putting stuff out the other end of it. So I think that the call to artists is not disillusion people who might be good. I think that I don't know if there's a way to create some sort of standards when they're doing these calls to art, because it's gone almost viral. I get emails all the time on enter this, enter that, and it's the same thing of, you know, for $35 do this, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, but I'm probably going to wind up in a pile of you know, tens of thousands of people, and you probably just got burned out on going through all these images, and how do you even judge that sort of thing? Maybe there should be a limit on the amount of artists that should be in those contests, right? Maybe it should be the first 2,000, or you know, or somebody who has a certain, you know, you don't want to limit the art, but you want to limit the amount of entries that get into it, because I don't know how those judges go through all of that, because that's a lot. It is a huge, you know, they have a limit. But so I don't know what's going on at the other end, but it seems to me that there's just a lot of imagery floating around. I'm not sure how they judge that. I don't think there's any way to really wrap your arms around the subjective I like it or I don't like it or whatever, because it's all on the beholder when it comes to art, right? There's really no parameters you can put on that. But I think that they probably need to figure out parameters and how many people that you enter into those contests to make sure that the quality is still there. But not that they're going to do that, because they make all their money off those entries anyway. So my suggestion goes completely, but I think what they need to, the word of caution is if you're turning out any sort of crap on this, then you have to be really careful of that, because I've seen that in a few contests, and then I don't go to those venues anymore.